The night of September 2nd, 1666, descended upon London. The city, cloaked in darkness, seemed peaceful and serene. The Thames River flowed quietly, reflecting the dim lights of the city. The stars twinkled above, casting a gentle glow over the rooftops. It was a night like any other, or so it seemed. A gentle breeze rustled through the streets. The leaves of the trees whispered secrets to the night, and the cool air brought a sense of calm. The cobblestone streets, usually bustling with activity, were now silent. The only sounds were the distant hoot of an owl and the occasional bark of a dog. The city and its inhabitants slept, oblivious to the inferno that awaited them. Families lay in their beds, children dreaming of adventures and parents resting after a long day's work. The city was at peace, unaware that this tranquility was about to be shattered. They were unaware of the tiniest of sparks, soon to ignite an inferno. In a small bakery on Pudding Lane, a single ember fell unnoticed. It landed on a pile of dry, flammable material. The ember glowed brighter, feeding on the tinder, and soon, a small flame flickered to life. This was a city ripe for disaster. The buildings, made mostly of wood, stood close together, creating a perfect environment for a fire to spread. The narrow streets and alleys acted as wind tunnels ready to fan the flames. Its wooden buildings stood crowded together. The timber-framed houses with their thatched roofs were highly flammable. The construction materials, combined with the close proximity of the buildings, created a tinderbox waiting to ignite. Narrow, winding alleys snaked through their midst. These alleys, while charming during the day, became dangerous pathways for fire at night. The twisting streets made it difficult for any potential firefighting efforts to be effective. The summer had been hot and dry, baking the city's timber to a crisp. The relentless sun had dried out the wooden structures, making them even more susceptible to fire. The parched streets and buildings were like kindling, ready to catch fire at the slightest spark. The stage was set for tragedy. The conditions were perfect for a disaster of unimaginable scale. The city, though unaware, was on the brink of a catastrophe that would change its history forever. The Great Fire of London, as it would be known, was a pivotal moment in the city's history. The fire raged for 4 days, consuming everything in its path. It destroyed homes, businesses, and landmarks, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. It was a disaster of unprecedented scale. The fire left thousands homeless and caused immense economic damage. The once thriving city was reduced to ashes, and the survivors were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Yet, from the ashes, a new London would emerge. The city began to rebuild, with new regulations and building codes to prevent such a disaster from happening again. The reconstruction efforts brought about a transformation, leading to a more modern and resilient city. This is the story of destruction and renewal, of resilience and rebirth. The Great Fire of London was not just a tale of devastation, but also one of hope and determination. The people of London showed incredible strength and perseverance in the face of adversity. It is a story that still resonates today, reminding us of the fragility of our cities and the indomitable spirit of their inhabitants. The lessons learned from the Great Fire continue to influence urban planning and fire safety measures, ensuring that such a tragedy is never repeated. The spirit of London forged in the flames remains unbroken and continues to inspire generations. Thomas Farriner was a baker. He lived with his family above his shop on Pudding Lane. In the early hours of Sunday, September 2nd, a fire broke out in his bakery. It is believed that embers from the bakery's oven ignited nearby fuel. The flames quickly took hold, spreading to the wooden structure of the bakery. Farriner and his family managed to escape. Their maid, however, was not so fortunate. She became the fire's first victim. The fire quickly spread to neighboring houses. Strong east winds fanned the flames, pushing them from building to building. The fire gained momentum with each passing moment. Soon, Pudding Lane was ablaze. The fire raged with an insatiable hunger, consuming all in its path. The Great Fire of London had begun. London in the 17th century was a city built largely of wood. Its houses were timber-framed and closely packed together. Narrow, winding streets acted as chimneys, funneling the flames upwards. The city's fire defenses were woefully inadequate. Leather buckets and hand-operated pumps were no match for the inferno that was unfolding. The city was a tinderbox waiting to ignite. Adding to the problem, London had experienced a dry summer. The wooden buildings were parched, They became perfect fuel for the fire. The wind, relentless in its assault, drove the flames onward. The fire jumped from street to street, consuming everything in its wake. The city's inhabitants, many of whom had gone to bed early on that fateful night, awoke to scenes of chaos and terror. Section 4. Days of Terror. The Inferno engulfs London. The Great Fire of London, which began on September 2, 1666, was a catastrophic event that forever changed the face of the city. It started in a small bakery on Pudding Lane, but quickly grew out of control, fueled by strong winds and the wooden structures that dominated the cityscape. The fire raged for 3 days and nights, consuming everything in its path. The flames leaped from building to building, creating a relentless wave of destruction that seemed unstoppable. The city's firefighting efforts were woefully inadequate, as the primitive equipment and techniques of the time were no match for the ferocity of the blaze. It spread with terrifying speed, engulfing entire neighborhoods in its fiery grasp. The densely packed wooden houses acted as kindling, allowing the fire to spread rapidly. The narrow streets and alleys became channels for the flames, directing them deeper into the heart of the city. The heat was so intense that it melted metal and cracked stone. The Inferno created its own weather system, with the heat generating powerful updrafts that carried burning embers high into the air, spreading the fire even further. The once sturdy buildings crumbled under the relentless assault, leaving behind a landscape of smoldering ruins. People fled their homes with only the clothes on their backs. Families were torn apart in the chaos, as parents desperately searched for their children amidst the smoke and flames. The streets were filled with the sounds of panic and despair, as people tried to escape the advancing inferno. The streets were jammed with terrified men, women, and children. The city's residents, who had once gone about their daily lives in relative peace, were now thrust into a nightmare scenario. The fear was palpable, as the fire showed no signs of abating. They carried their meager possessions, desperate to escape the inferno. Some managed to save a few cherished items, while others were forced to leave everything behind. The sense of loss was overwhelming, as people watched their homes and livelihoods go up in flames. The River Thames, usually a lifeline for the city, became a river of fire as burning debris floated on its surface. The waterway, which had always been a source of sustenance and commerce, was now a scene of devastation. The flames reflected off the water, creating an eerie and haunting spectacle. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning wood. The once clear skies were now choked with ash and soot, making it difficult to breathe. The sun was obscured by the dense smoke, casting an ominous pall over the city. The screams of those trapped by the flames echoed through the night. The fire showed no mercy, consuming everything in its path. The cries of the trapped and the injured added to the sense of horror and helplessness that gripped the city. London, once a bustling metropolis, was now a scene of unimaginable horror. The fire had reduced the city to a charred wasteland, with thousands of buildings destroyed and countless lives forever changed. The Great Fire of London was a tragedy of epic proportions, leaving a lasting scar on the city's history. Section 5. The Cathedral Falls. A city mourns its landmarks. The Great Fire of London, which raged for 4 days in September 1666, left an indelible mark on the city. It was a catastrophe that not only consumed homes and businesses but also devoured the very symbols of London's identity. The fire consumed everything in its path, including some of London's most iconic landmarks. The Inferno, driven by strong winds and fueled by wooden structures, spread with a ferocity that was impossible to contain. The flames leaped from building to building, creating a sea of fire that seemed to have no end. St. Paul's Cathedral, a symbol of the city's faith and history, was gutted by the flames. This magnificent structure, which had stood as a beacon of hope and resilience for centuries, was no match for the relentless fire. The cathedral's walls, which had witnessed countless events in London's history, crumbled under the intense heat. Its magnificent dome, a marvel of engineering, collapsed into the inferno. The Guildhall, the Royal Exchange, and countless churches and public buildings were also destroyed. These structures were not just buildings, they were the heart and soul of the city, each with its own story to tell. The loss of these landmarks was a devastating blow to the city's spirit. The fire did not discriminate, it consumed everything in its path, leaving behind a trail of destruction and despair. The once vibrant cityscape was reduced to smoldering ruins, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning wood and stone. The destruction of these landmarks was a devastating blow to the city's spirit. It was as if the very heart of London had been ripped out. The streets, once bustling with life and activity, were now eerily silent, save for the crackling of dying embers and the distant cries of those who had lost everything. It was as if the very heart of London had been ripped out. The loss of these buildings, each a repository of history and culture, was felt deeply by all Londoners. The city had lost more than just physical structures. It had lost pieces of its identity, its heritage, and its collective memory. The loss of these buildings, each a repository of history and culture, was felt deeply by all Londoners. The grief was palpable, as people wandered through the ruins, searching for remnants of their past. The fire had not only destroyed their homes and livelihoods, but had also taken away the places where they had worshipped, traded, and gathered as a community. Yet even as they mourned their losses, they began to plan for the future. The resilience of the Londoners shone through the ashes. They knew that the city had to be rebuilt, not just for themselves but for future generations. Plans were drawn up, and the rebuilding process began almost immediately, with a determination that was as fierce as the fire that had destroyed their city. The spirit of London, it seemed, could not be extinguished by fire. The people of London, with their indomitable spirit, rose from the ashes, ready to rebuild and restore their beloved city. The Great Fire of London was a tragedy, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in the city's history, one of resilience, renewal, and hope.